be live. My name's Evan Johnson, and I'm joined here today by none other than Michael Boggs.
Hey.
How are you doing today, Michael?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. So we're all hanging out in our own homes as we do in these times, but we're here today to bring you guys a Marvel Champions AMA. So Caleb wasn't able to join us today, but we do have the Michael Boggs, and we're going to go through a whole bunch of questions. So we collected a whole bunch from a forum thread that was done earlier, and feel free to throw more questions in the Twitch chat here. I'm watching that. We'll be able to pull out questions from that as we're going along. Before we get into some questions for you, Michael, there were a number of questions that I saw posted related to release plans for upcoming hero packs. And I just wanted to address those really quick and clear those up as much as we can so that we can kind of talk design, talk about that kind of stuff for the rest of the stream. So I saw a bunch of people asking basically about the release plans for these upcoming hero packs. So our current plan, and please bear in mind that these things are subject to change due to global tendencies, shutdowns in various places, and all of that. We are evaluating these things on an ongoing basis. But that said, the current plan is that in the United States, Black Widow hero pack will release in June, the first week of June. I believe that's June 5th, is that Friday there. So that would be Black Widow in June, followed by Doctor Strange in July, followed by Hulk in August. So basically, we're turning to one hero pack a month. And the intention also is that with the release of the Hulk hero pack in August, that is when we will be returning to global simultaneous releases. So our current directive and strategy for this is that no other country should release the Hulk hero pack until August, when the North America will release it at the same time. Everyone will release Hulk hero pack together, and we'll all get this at the same time. So that is basically what is planned for releases. I saw a story being circulated that was posted on ICB2 talking about 7 Marvel releases in June. Basically the answer with that is that one of those is the Black Widow hero pack. The other 6 are Crisis Protocol from Atomic Mass Games. They're Crisis Protocol miniatures. So don't be confused. Those are not Marvel Champions products. It's just the one Black Widow pack. So now that hopefully we have got that cleared up, let us get into some design questions. So I see, let's kick off with a rules question, actually. This one is from Quickland. He says, on Hawkeye's quiver, after searching, do you put the other cards back in any order you choose? And are you supposed to shuffle the deck after searching the top 5?
No. We decided with this card to sort of introduce a new language into the game. And I've heard quite a few people be confused with the way that we phrase it, for the time being. But I think as time goes on, this language will become more common. Effectively, you just look at the top 5 cards, pick the one that you need, and put the rest back in the same order.
Perfect. I see a question from Daryl here. Of all the cards you designed for Marvel Champions, what's your favorite?
I really love it's in the upcoming Hulk pack. We spoiled it in our FFG preview article. It's toe-to-toe. It's an aggression event that says choose an enemy, that enemy attacks you, and then you deal 5 damage to the enemy. It's only 1 cost. It's very efficient, but I really like the play style that it kind of entails. I really love the story that it kind of brings about. And I kind of like cheesing it too, because it's not necessarily a cost that you have to pay. It's just an effect with the enemy attacking you. So you could stun the enemy. You could get a tough status card on your character. You can still defend. There's a lot of stuff you can do to kind of work around it. So that's just a card that I always have fun with, and I always enjoy seeing on the table.
Perfect. And then is there a card that you might wish that you had done differently, and why would that be?
Yeah, I think in retrospect, the card Great Responsibility in the core set, it's an event that says something along the lines of like when threat would be placed on a scheme, it's a hero interrupt. You can discard it to take it as damage instead. And I see a lot of people overlook that card. It's a powerful card, especially in multiplayer, because you can use it during like step 1 of the villain phase when threat is placed just automatically from the main scheme's threat acceleration value. But a lot of people overlook that. And I think maybe in retrospect, we should have done potentially a simpler effect in its place and then save that card for later once, the player base had a greater understanding of the functionality and stuff. So maybe we could have changed that.
For sure. I see a question in the chat here from Ensign53. Can we expect to see reprints of cards errata in future prints? Or basically, can we see erratas implemented into reprints of a
Yeah, if we issue an errata, then we put in what's called a reprint change with our production team, and we'll have it implemented on the next printing of cards. So if we've errated something, then it should be fixed in print later.
Perfect. This is from Kayubi Kobe. Do the allies foreshadow how the heroes will work? So if we get an ally, is that kind of hinting like the hero will work in a similar way or have similar effects?
That's an interesting question. Not necessarily. I personally think it's really cool when the hero version and the ally version are somewhat parallel. I believe She-Hulk was just spoiled yesterday. A lot of people seem to really enjoy that design, and that was a card that I always liked during playtesting. But it's definitely not a rule. I think when we're creating allies, we want to represent the character in the best way we can without making like an overly complex and complicated effect. Whereas with the hero, we can definitely delve deeper into those effects a little more. So sometimes we're going to see similarities, but not every time.
For sure. So another question from Geralt, going back to that. What is the decision process on which versions of heroes to do first, i.e. which personality are you going to do them as an ally or as a hero, that kind of thing?
Generally speaking, we try to represent each hero in a way that we feel is kind of has the broadest appeal, sort of represents the hero most fully. And so a lot of times we'll pull from kind of multiple versions of the hero. You'll see art from a lot of different comics because we really want to encapsulate that entire hero's thematic representation. So allies are very similar whenever we choose an ally. So, with allies, we have to pick just one piece of art that we can use to represent that character. So it's a little harder to sort of have this greater scope, but we try the best we can with that.
All right. A couple questions from Alter Egos. He says, in competitive card games, you often see keywords and mechanics introduced to help drive the game forward. What role do you feel new keywords have in the design of Marvel Champions, and how much does that inform future hero or scenario design? More broadly, what factors go into determining the design space for already present mechanics or card types, like building on villain upgrades and environments with Crossbones and Absorbing Man in Rise of Red Skull?
So I think that we definitely want to introduce new keywords as time goes on because it does add new flavor to the game. It keeps things interesting, but we are sort of in a fortunate situation with the way that we design heroes and scenarios, in that we can really push the boundaries of new mechanics within those specific kits. And we've already kind of done that with the hero pool, and we'll see that more as we go forward. There's a lot of new and interesting thing in each one of those kits that really helps that hero stand out from the other one. So we don't necessarily have to rely as heavily as maybe some games do on new keywords. We want to bring them about and we want to use them when we have them, but it's not something that will necessarily be pushing as hard as maybe some other games do.
For sure, for sure. Another question from Jedi Geek Girl here. What Marvel comics are you reading right now?
Let's see. Here recently, I actually read a couple Hulk issues, some more Immortal Hulk when I was doing some design work on him. I tried to read as much as I could, but I didn't get to finish everything. Every now and then I'll jump in and try to keep updated on Miss Marvel, because she was a character that I was able to discover through, designing her kit, and I really enjoyed her. And then there's a whole host of other comics that I can't talk about right now, but
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
That was a very sneaky question,
Yeah.
but I knew that you would be up for it. Who is your favorite villain of the new campaign box, and what's your favorite mechanic introduced in the campaign box?
So I'm a little partial to Absorbing Man because I was lucky enough to be able to design his mechanics and scenario. And I really didn't know a whole lot about him before I started designing him. He was another one that I had to kind of discover. And his power set's really wacky. Like pretty much any material that he touches, he can just turn into that stone or metal or wood or whatever it is. And you know, I like that scenario a lot. But I think in the box, when I'm actually playing mechanically, I really love how Red Skull came together. I feel like he is like the villain to have at the end of the box. Like Caleb Grace did a really good job with him. So thematically, Absorbing Man, but mechanically, I really love Red Skull.
Yeah. Another question: if you were to open this box, the Rise of Red Skull box, right now, which hero would you choose as your first hero through the campaign?
I would choose Spider-Woman. I really like her play style. I think it's exciting to, you know, kind of pick up that new hero out of the box and just play them fresh. Spider-Woman is a little more intricate than Hawkeye, which is intended, and I, you know, like kind of that more intricate play style. So she's probably the one I would pick.
A follow-up question on that, Jedi Geek Girl is asking, what's been your favorite thing about Spider-Woman when playtesting her with the cards that we already know about?
Well, I really like the variety. I think you know, the way her mechanic works of, you know, getting boosted up on all of her stats, her ATK, her THW, and her DEF, based off the number of aspect cards she's played. Kind of like every single hand is sort of a new puzzle that you have to solve, and there's just a lot of stuff you can do with her, especially if you play your cards right. You can do some really cool combos that you just can't pull off with other characters. On top of that, you know, there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with combining two aspects together. So I really love her entire kit. I think it's a lot of fun.
Nice. Question from Drewness. Is there a mechanic from Netrunner, Arkham Horror, LCG, etc., that you love to try and add to champions?
Oh, that's interesting. Nothing that I can think of from Netrunner. I feel like the two games are pretty wildly different. Arkham, I'm sure there's a lot that we could learn. Matt Newman is always there to help us, and you know, he's inspired a lot of our designs and stuff. There's not anything specific that I can think of off the top of my head. I know that when we first announced campaign, before we ever even said it was the Rise of Red Skull, a lot of people were making comparisons and expecting it to be a very Arkham Horror-esque type campaign, and it's a bit different, but I know that there is sort of that want there, so maybe we could take some lessons from that down the line and, you know, talk to Matt and try to...
This question is from Keeble2. When assigning heroes to their starting aspect, their aspect in their pre-built decks, is it more about mechanics or more about theme? Is this in mind early in the process when heroes are being decided, or later after the general mechanics for a hero have already been established?
It's a bit of both. Sometimes it's mechanical, sometimes it's thematic. A lot of times we will establish the hero's 15 cards first before we put them in an aspect, but not every time. Like we knew with Captain America, he was going to be leadership because he's Captain America, like he is the leader. We also knew with Hulk that he was going to be aggression because he's the Hulk. But there were some characters that took a little bit longer. I believe with Miss Marvel, we debated for a long time whether she should be justice or protection. We ultimately ended up giving Black Widow justice, so Miss Marvel was sort of the protection pick. But no matter how they kind of fall into place, we always try to make sure that, you know, the aspect cards that are in that pack work really well with the hero. They can work with anyone, but they synergize very well. And we definitely want to make, you know, people feel like when they pick up the deck, it's a fun, exciting deck, and there's nothing too wonky or anything like that. So we try to synergize as much as we can. Very
cool. I see a question about the variants that you guys put out recently. So Suit Osiris asks, what's the highest heroic level that someone from FFG or friends of FFG have achieved?
To my knowledge, heroic level 2. I haven't heard of anyone going beyond that. Maybe it's happened, but I personally haven't seen it. I actually haven't heard of anyone completing the claw challenge that I put up in the article. So I'm still waiting on someone to send me a message about that or something. Take a picture. I want to see it.
Yeah. I think I saw some comments on it. People being like, "Why are we being tormented with this?"
When I was first writing that article, I was gonna put it at level 2, and then I thought about it. I'm like, no, somebody's gonna beat this immediately, and then the comments are gonna be like, "Oh, this isn't challenging enough." So I want people to have something that they can reach for, they can stretch for. If it takes a few times or some rebuilding of the deck and stuff, then I think it's worth it. It's nice to have that achievement.
Awesome. A question from John Boy John, 1990. With all the heroes, aspects, villains, and modular sets, the game has great variety and replayability. But I often find most games follow a similar arc. Players trying to get out of the early game as quick as possible while not losing. Heroes build up their supports and upgrades, and the final act is about dealing a ton of damage to win. Much of the encounter deck design phase so far is tempo hits, minions, side schemes, additional attacks, and schemes for the villain, which is what creates this gameplay arc. Do you have plans for more varied counter cards and effects that disrupt this current gameplay arc, heroes building up and smashing down the villain?
Oh yeah, definitely. Early on, the scenarios that we introduced, the ones in the core set, the Green Goblin scenarios and the Wrecking Crew, we didn't want to overwhelm people with new mechanics. We know that we have a lot of players that are drawn to this game that maybe aren't as hardcore as some of our previous games. So we really wanted to keep things introductory and straightforward. So that was kind of how we established those scenarios. But I think going forward, we can definitely start to play with new challenges and new mechanics and things that are going to throw curveballs at the players that they haven't seen before.
Absolutely. A question that I've seen a couple of people ask in the chat. With the release of Spider-Woman in Rise of Red Skull, so she uses aggression and justice. Both of those aspects will now be quote-unquote unbalanced with the other two aspects in terms of number of cards. Are there plans to rebalance the 4 aspects in the future so that they all have an identical number of cards?
We're not necessarily striving for an identical number of cards, but we are trying to keep things as balanced as possible. We knew that Spider-Woman would kind of upset that balance a little bit, and we have accounted for that a little bit later down the line, but it doesn't have to be a perfect ratio of this aspect has 30, this one has 30, so on and so forth. We try to keep them as close as we can. I think when it comes to the aspects, we expect that a lot of people are going to be drawn to aggression and justice because they are really so simple in sort of your game plan. Aggression says beat up the bad guys. Justice says slow down the bad guys. And that's kind of it. There's not a whole lot more in the core set. And even going forward, like we always try to keep that focus. So if there's a few more of those cards, maybe that's not such a bad thing because it just gives people a little more variety in those more streamlined aspects.
Perfect. Another question here. Many of the game's side schemes are simply a combination of a threat amount and a crisis, hazard, or acceleration symbol. For example, Taskmaster's side scheme is not functionally different to Whiplash's side scheme. As the game progresses, do you intend to have side schemes with more flavor or additional rules text?
Yeah, we do. Actually, there for a long time in the core set, we actually had I think we had more varied side schemes. We had different, force interrupts and triggers and responses and all kinds of stuff. But as time went on, we kind of found that it was easy to miss those things. I think sometimes, you're sitting with your friend, you're playing a 2-player game, you're looking at your cards and you can pay attention to that easily. And your friend kind of has an eye on their stuff. But sometimes it's easy to forget that stuff in the middle. It's just easier to overlook it, especially for less experienced gamers or just people who just want a more casual experience. So we really try to make sure that those encounter cards weren't missed as often. And we found that using those big symbols was really the way to do it. Going forward, though, I definitely think that there is room to kind of spice those up and to create new challenges and new mechanics and stuff with those.
Nice. I see an interesting question here from Warlock Alex 92. If you were to make a 5th aspect, what would that aspect revolve around?
If we were to do it, we might go back to kind of the idea that we explored during core set development. There was a point where we actually had a 5th aspect that was called Determination. Its color was purple, and its whole focus was like doing anything necessary to stop the villain. So whether it was, taking self-damage or dealing yourself encounter cards or just putting threat on the main scheme, I think was a card that we had. It was really anything you had to do to knock out the villain. Over time, though, we kind of found that that aspect didn't stand on its own as well as the other ones. Some of those mechanics could very easily be ported into the other aspects. A good one is toe-to-toe. For a long time, that was a determination card, but after a while, we were like, this could just be an aggression card, and it would feel just as thematic. So I don't know if we'll ever go back to a fifth aspect. If we did, that's probably the place we would start. That's not necessarily the place we would end up, but I think it would be a good start.
For sure. Mr. Hippo is asking basically about additional statuses or conditions being added to the game. Do you see any of that potential in the future?
Yeah, we could maybe do that. It's a little bit harder because, you know, whatever we introduce would probably have to be introduced in a box. And then if we want to play with that mechanic in the future, it would be unfair, for instance, to introduce new status cards in the Rise of Red Skull box, but then in a couple hero packs later say, hey, you got to have that box to do this mechanic. Like, it just wouldn't feel very fair. So however we were to introduce that type of thing, it would have to be in a very thought out and sort of planned out way. But it could be something that we do. We've talked about similar things before. It's definitely not off the table.
Awesome. Question from Pingu Paul here. How much do you value balance when creating a game like this? Obviously, you playtest a lot, but is the focus on balancing all the heroes or making sure they're all fun to play and unique? Given it's a co-op game, one being stronger than the other is not necessarily in the world, so long as they're all fun and add to the experience.
Yeah, I think, you know, we always try to make sure the cards are balanced and you know, that they're not going to break the game, but because we do want the players to feel as heroic as possible, sometimes we do push the power on things a little bit. And I think really at the end of the day, as long as like the character that you're playing feels like that character really has those strong storytelling moments, like that's really what we want to capture. We definitely want to make sure the balance is at the forefront of everything we do, but I think this is, you know, in the question, like if we do miss that mark, then it's not going to destroy any meta or anything like that.
Right. I see someone, a couple people asking in the chat why I'm not answering more rules questions. These rules questions are typically long and complicated, and Michael would have to actually be reading the cards in order to deliver a clear answer to you, and they just really slow the whole AMA down. So there's an outlet. If you have rules questions, you can submit them through our website, and Michael and Caleb will see them that way and get back to you. So I would advise asking your rules questions through that channel rather than the AMA, because we're not really going to pull out too many of those out of the chat at this point. A question from Maniac Medic. Were there any other names considered for the game besides Marvel Champions, and what were they?
Yeah, we had a list of, I want to say it was around 7 or 8 names that we went through. I don't remember what they all were, but at the time, I actually really liked the name Marvel Crisis. That was before I knew about Crisis Protocol. So I like really pushed hard, and everybody's like, "No, we can't do that." And then I learned later that, you know, that there was a reason probably. But yeah. Nate French was actually the one who pitched Champions because he felt like it really conveyed that sense of heroism. And Andrew Navarro, who was the head of studio at the time, he completely agreed. So that was the route we went. And I think it's fitting. I definitely do think you feel like a champion when you're playing the game.
Yeah. This one's Spider-Man. Are there any mechanics or card ideas that have come up but gotten shelved for later because another character embodies that idea better? Alternatively, any heroes that got bumped up in the queue because of a mechanic they embodied that you wanted to use sooner?
I don't know if we've ever actually bumped up any heroes, but we have definitely come up with designs that, you know, we thought really fit a hero at the time, and then explored it with that hero, and then said, yeah, you know what, maybe it would be better to save this for someone later. Spider-Woman is actually a good example of that. Her dual aspect mechanic was something that we tried out in Hulk at first, because, you know, he does have that kind of split personality. And we ultimately felt like it made Hulk almost a little too thoughtful. Like, you really had to plan ahead with your deck and stuff. And Hulk, you should just sit down and smash stuff. Like, it shouldn't be a lot of brain power behind that. But we felt like, you know, with Spider-Woman's kind of double agent spy thing, she really epitomized that kind of, you know, split down the middle. So we ultimately ended up saving that for her. And we've done that time and time again. We come up with mechanics that we think are cool and then realize that they actually fit another character better, and then, you know, come up with something new for the current character.
Excellent. A question from Janaka, basically asking, when are we, he wants to have like an equal number of scenarios to hero packs. What are kind of your thoughts on that? And do you see kind of the ratios changing in the future?
It was something that we talked about early on when we were first coming up with how we were going to release waves and things. And to my understanding, it's something that we've explored in the past with like Lord of the Rings and Arkham. And, you know, compared to that system to our current system, I think there are pros and cons of both. I think that right now it feels like there's not a lot of scenarios to play against because, you know, realistically there are only 5. But I'm guessing that with the release of the Rise of Red Skull, not only will you get 5 more scenarios, which will, you know, double the number that you have to play against, you'll also get a ton of modular sets as well. And just as we go forward, that number will get even bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think with all of that customizability that comes with the modular sets, I think overall in the long run, it'll be more exciting to get more heroes than it will to get an overload of sets, because you can customize those sets so to your liking.
Yeah, exactly. Question from Remedy791. A lot of discussion seems to be directed towards deck building for single heroes and their focused game plan. How important is it for you to offer cards, experiences, and heroes that work better in a team setting or group play? What's your favorite combination between 2 or 3 heroes that reflects that style of play?
So when we are designing things, we tend to think about 2 and 3 players a little more strongly than maybe like single player. Not because we don't want to support single player, but just because this is a cooperative game, and we feel like, you know, a lot of the strongest elements of the game do really shine in that cooperative aspect. So yeah, we've tried to create variety for both settings, whether you're in a multiplayer game or a single player game. There are stronger cards in one kind of group setting than, you know, a single player setting, and vice versa. And we're always trying to make sure there are options. As far as a team up is concerned, I think that Black Widow and Hulk really complement each other really well. One just smashes face, one kind of controls the villain, what he's doing. In the core set, I always really liked Iron Man and Spider-Man. I feel like Spider-Man's really good at like kind of locking down the board at the time at the beginning of the game, and Iron Man's great at like coming back and, you know, swinging and just laying waste to everything. So yeah, I think there's quite a few heroes that complement each other, and we're always trying to keep that in mind when we're developing things to make sure everything feels cohesive.
For sure. We have a question asking any hints on how you'll handle heroes that have similar power sets if they get made. For example, like Scarlet Spider being similar to Spider-Man, War Machine having a lot in common with Iron Man, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll do it similarly to how we did She-Hulk and Hulk. Those 2 characters are, you know, functionally pretty much the same in their power set. Gamma radiation, super strength, rage, all of that stuff. But I personally feel that, you know, playing She-Hulk and playing Hulk, they feel very different in a way. Like they both smash stuff, but they kind of do it differently. And you know, Nate French has actually said to Caleb Grace and myself that he believes there's, you know, 100 different ways to do each character. We could represent a hero one way, and then, you know, the next iteration have something wildly different that still feels like that character. So we're always trying to explore the route that we feel represents that character the best, but there's really a lot of ways to do that.
I'm seeing a lot of people asking if there are plans for PvP scenarios. Sometimes they're calling out specifically like Civil War or having it tied to that, or just PvP. Is this something that you've thought about, that you're interested in exploring at some point?
I believe we've talked about it. I think it's been mentioned. It's something we maybe could see one day. I definitely know that I've heard quite a few of the same sentiments. So it's maybe something we'll see down the line.
For sure. This question's from Flexus. Some aspects seem to lack enough versatility and thwart potential. For example, he's played a whole lot of games of Heroic 1 and Heroic 2. He can safely say that me and my friend have to pick leadership and justice to have a shot at the win at all. Are you planning to give more flexible cards to defense and aggression that can handle the higher difficulty with heroic?
Yeah, I think over time we'll definitely see more versatility, excuse me, in each aspect. We want to make each aspect feel like they can, definitely succeed in their own right, for sure.
Mm-hmm. A couple of more lore-focused questions here. So this one's from Kennedy Hawk 2. Says, as a rough order of magnitude, how many comics do you think you've read while preparing and designing cards for this game?
Oh man, easily over 100, maybe close to 200. For the core set, every single character I was trying to, delve as much as I could into their backstory. Same thing with the villains. There were a lot of like cross stories that I read for the core set. Miss Marvel, I tried to, read as many of her comics that I could. Anytime I work on a new character, I try to at least like do one of their series if I can. Some characters are harder to do than others, but I'm trying to absorb as much as I can to get the best pictures. So I'd say at this point, more than 100, maybe close to 200, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah. A question from Vardayan. As a child growing up, did you have a superhero that you pretended to be, and why? Has your choice of hero changed as you've grown up?
Yeah. So I have a younger brother. He's 3.5, 4 years younger than me, and a younger cousin who's about 2 years younger than me. So whenever we would play, I was the older kid. I got to pick my hero first. So I always picked Spider-Man. But when I was like on the playground, I always got stuck with Colossus because like all my friends liked X-Men. And I was always the biggest kid in my class. Like up until I was in high school, I was always the biggest kid in my class. So I was Colossus. And Colossus is cool, but I always wanted to secretly be like Wolverine or Iceman. Those are the two I really wanted, but I couldn't be those. I was too tall. So, but as far as when I play superheroes today, I tend to still play Spider-Man. I jump around my house and do all that stuff.
Yeah, perfect. Swinging from blankets and all that.
It's not as safe as it seems. It's really dangerous.
Question from Cool Harry. If you could have a beer or drink with anyone from the Marvel Universe, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good question. It's probably Peter Parker. I feel like that's almost a default answer, but he just seems like a cool guy. He seems like he's been through a lot. He's seen a lot, but he's always kind of sarcastic and chill and just fun. So I probably am.
Yeah. Seems like a pretty cool guy.
Yeah.
A question from Elferston. Do you follow any of the custom fan-made decks? Have there been any that you want to officially produce for the game? What are your thoughts on the fan-made decks? All that kind of stuff.
Honestly, we don't look at the fan-made content too much. Not because that we don't think that it's important or that people shouldn't enjoy it, but I think that Caleb and I both agree that we don't want to sort of cloud our vision in a way. I don't want to look at someone's fan-made content and then make something later and somebody says, oh, hey, that was the thing I made and you just ripped it off. So not that we would do that, but there's always things that can leak in and stuff, right? You accidentally create something and it even just looks similar. So we really don't look at the fan-made stuff too much.
Perfect. A question, so some more kind of future-facing questions on what might be coming in the future. This one's from Dracosis. Is it possible for Fantasy Flight Games to add X-Men or other superhero universes to Marvel Champions based on the licenses that currently have?
Potentially. I think we're still exploring things, but I will say that both Caleb and I are huge X-Men fans, so him and I both want to do it, and I hope we can down the line.
Yep. A question from Daryl. If the X-Men and Fantastic Four come to Marvel Champions, which heroes from each group would you call dibs on designing?
X-Men, definitely Iceman. He's always been I don't know what it is about Iceman. I just think he's really cool. For Fantastic Four, I'm a little less familiar with them. I've never really read their comics too much. I saw the movie that came out in like 2005, I think it was. So I'm not super familiar with them. If I had to pick, though, I'd probably say Sue Storm. She seems like the coolest out of all of them. I love her force bubbles, her invisibility. I don't really know how we represent invisibility mechanically, but I'm sure we'd find a way.
Yeah, you put the cards under the table.
Close your eyes.
Yes. Captain Jaguar Shark asks, how soon before we see repeat heroes with a different alter ego, such as Monica or Marvel as Captain Marvel? You know, there are any number of examples you could list.
Yeah, probably a long time, if ever. There are so many heroes that I think we would probably prefer to do newer heroes before we do repeats of heroes. But it's something that we could do if we felt it was appropriate.
Maniac Medic is asking, how many heroes are currently in development or just waiting to be released?
More than like 3 waves worth, I think 4 waves. It's like over 20. It's probably somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like 2 years worth of releases or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, we're pretty far ahead.
Yeah, that's awesome. How are you choosing the groups of heroes that you're going to work on for each cycle?
So we created a line plan early on that sort of kind of dictates how we want to establish everything. We actually based it in some ways off of how the MCU structured their movies. And so we have kind of this skeleton in place that sort of ties everything together over sort of a long-term plan.
All right. Cool Harry says, with a decent number of characters who've been both heroes and villains over the course of their existence, is there a chance we'll see some of them on both sides of the game, either as actual heroes and villains or as allies and as minions and so on?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I think there's not really anything stopping us from doing that. It's something we could see down the line for sure.
All right. Grialtis is especially keen to see Ghost Rider as a hero, not an ally, he specifies.
So Ghost Rider, he's not one I know too much about, but I've seen a lot of people really want him. So he's definitely one we could see later for sure.
Yeah. This one's from Jay Jackson, 1991. Given Kamala Khan's Miss Marvel, the Wrecking Crew, and Spider-Woman are all somewhat lesser-known characters in the general Marvel fan community, what other lesser-known characters are you working on or thinking about designing heroes or scenario sets for? Is this something that you're kind of considering, or is it going to be mostly focused on like big AAA stuff for a while?
We definitely want to keep a variety. I think having those big names is important because it really draws people in. But I also think having those lesser characters is equally important because it kind of shows that the Marvel universe is much greater than just a few characters. So we want to, have as much variety as possible. And a lot of these lesser known characters really have strong, almost, cult-like followings. Like some people are just really fanatical about some characters. So one that I'll name, what's his face? Moon Knight. I see comments all the time about Moon Knight. Everybody loves Moon Knight. I don't know a lot about him. I haven't read a lot of his stuff, a little bit here and there, but I know that even in the office, like over on the miniature side, people talk about Moon Knight. So there are just some characters that haven't made their way to the big screen yet, but still have a massive following behind them. And we want to release as many of those characters as we possibly can.
Yeah. Jedi Geek Girl asks, if someone were to come up to you and have you sign a card, what card would you like that to be?
Oh, that's interesting. Probably maybe one of Miss Marvel's cards or just Miss Marvel's hero card. I really love how she turned out. I love her play style. I'm pretty proud of her. And I think she kind of has a special place for me because she really pulled me into the comics, and I didn't know how great those comics were until I started working on her. So, yeah.
Rargren is asking, is there a question you were hoping someone would ask that hasn't been asked yet?
How's my day? Oh, wait, no, you asked that at the beginning.
Yeah, I started off with that, man.
Well, but they didn't ask it.
That's true. They did not ask it.
There's nothing I can think of off the top of my head. I feel like we pretty much covered a good amount of ground here.
Yeah. A question from Garmagoth. Will Marvel Champions be the only Marvel game published by FFG? I can answer that. No, it will not be the only Marvel game published by FFG. And that's all we're going to say about that today. Similar to Arkham's Return to series, are there any thoughts about revisiting old scenarios with new twists?
Yeah, we've talked about it quite a bit, and I know that there are quite a few people who really enjoyed that. But it's something that could maybe happen down the line, but it's not something that we're likely to see anytime soon. I feel like, kind of again with creating new heroes compared to returning heroes, we would just prefer to do new scenarios. There are so many characters and so many situations that I think it would just be more exciting to make new content.
All right. Remedy791 says, how do you feel about the implementation of a single standard and expert modular set shared across all scenarios? Kind of related, are there any mechanics or elements of game design now that the game is out that you feel need a second glance at?
I think that we did that intentionally. We actually, early on in the core set, we had, before I think we ever even created the standard set, we talked about how we were going to make each villain kind of feel different in their like base activation cards, because we knew we wanted to have some surprise attacks and some surprise schemes in there. But over time, we just realized that having a standard set and then for expert mode, having an expert set, it saved us from having to recreate the same effects over and over and over again. So I personally think it worked out. Maybe down the line, we could see some sort of expansion on that or some sort of tweak on that. But for the time being, I think myself and Caleb are pretty happy with how that's kind of come about.
Awesome. Warlock Alex 92 is asking, if you could design any villain, what villain would you make?
I'm always partial to Venom, kind of like my love for Spider-Man. I was a little kid in the 90s, and Venom was big then, and he's got his bulging muscles and his long tongue and all that stuff and his fangs. So he's just a fun villain. I really like him, and I think he'd be a fun one to design.
Nice. I saw a couple people asking about upcoming streams, if we're going to see more gameplay like we did with Thor and all that. The answer is yes, absolutely. We're going to be doing more streams. As soon as we can get back in the office, we'll be doing more like in-person gameplay and stuff. So you can absolutely expect to see something showcasing like Black Widow, Doctor Strange, and Hulk playing a scenario together and all that kind of stuff. We'll be very excited to be getting back to a studio, being able to see each other face to face, and being able to play some of these some Marvel champions for you guys. A question from the Borben, who I've seen ask a number of questions about Namor. Would you say Namor is a hero or a villain?
So I'll admit that I'm not very knowledgeable about Namor, but from what I do know, I mean, it seems to be a bit of both. I know that one of the earlier questions was asking if we could ever represent a character as both, and he seems like he'd be a good fit for that if we ever did.
Yeah. Elusuave32 says, is it difficult to remember the public meta, quote unquote, versus your current design meta and having to answer questions from 15 or 20 sets ago?
Yes, extremely difficult. Sometimes people ask questions, I'm like, what was that card again? And I'll have to go and like look it up and research it. And sometimes too, it's like I'll see someone talking about a card and how much they like it in conjunction with this card. And in my head, I'll think, oh, but why don't they like it with this card? And then we haven't released that one yet. It hasn't been announced. So yeah, it is a bit of a juggling act sometimes.
All right. We are just about done here. So if you have any final questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. Michael, do you have anything else that you want to say before we tackle these final few questions that'll be coming in?
I just appreciate everybody taking the time to come on here and ask the questions. It's always, a lot of fun to do this type of thing. So it's cool to see the passion, and I hope that everyone is able to stay safe and, just kind of enjoy their time, play some Marvel Champions while they're at home.
All right. Let's see. I see some people spamming when will Thanos come. I think it's safe to say he will come at some point. He's too big to lose out.
We would, yeah. It would be a missed opportunity not to do him eventually. Yeah.
Improvidence is asking, how has remote work affected the design process?
Oh, that's interesting. It's made some things easier. It's made some things harder. I find that, just because it's me by myself. Sometimes it's easier to really get in the zone and really focus. I don't have as many, active conversations going on. At the same time, though, there are a lot of things that Caleb and I need to communicate on, or that I need to communicate with to graphic design. So that process has been a little trickier, but we've gotten through it. There's plenty of apps and communication systems in place that we have. So it's been an adjustment, but it really hasn't slowed anything down. I think in a lot of ways it's sped some things up and just made things a little more streamlined.
Let's see here. Aylmer B asks, any possibility of street level heroes and scenarios soon? They're eager for stuff like Daredevil, Kingpin, your Jessica Jones and that sort of stuff. Yeah,
potentially. I love Daredevil. I love Kingpin. I think those are very fun characters. Those were always some of my favorites when I was little, and I know that Caleb likes them as well. So I definitely don't think anyone should be surprised if we see them eventually.
All right. And I think maybe a final question will be maybe a little bit of a tease of the future. So the final limit says, sounds like Red Skull includes the Reality Stone. More to come, winky face.
Maybe.
All right, so that is where we will leave you guys for today. Thank you so much for participating in this Marvel Champions AMA with Michael Boggs here. We appreciate all of you guys so much. Thank you for bearing with us through COVID-19 and our working from home, our crappy internet creating weird, artifacting on the video and, delayed releases. So as I mentioned right at the beginning, I will touch on this again. Returning to regular releases in June is the current plan, with Black Widow in June, Doctor Strange in July, Hulk in August. With Hulk in August, that should be the return to global simultaneous releases. So ideally, all around the world, Hulk will release at the same time in August there. So that is the plan. Know that things are kind of crazy and plans can change. But thank you everyone so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, follow us on social media. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.